So, what if the most complicated economic policies in the world could actually be boiled down to a single ancient commandment? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating perspective that connects theology, finance, and, even modern technology. It's a journey that's going to challenge how we think about money itself. Let's get right into it.
And this is where it all begins, with this incredibly powerful statement from Pastor Alin Armstrong. He says, God's monetary policy is very simple. You shall not steal. Now think about that. In a world of central banking, quantitative easing, all this complexity, this one simple commandment totally reframes money. It's not just an economic tool, it's a moral one.
So what does that actually mean, to base an entire monetary system on a single rule? Let's unpack this foundational idea and see what it implies for how a just economy is supposed to work.
Well, the argument goes like this. Systems like the Federal Reserve are built to be complex, almost intentionally confusing, right? But the divine principle is the exact opposite. It's just one crystal clear rule. You shall not steal. And from this perspective, that single commandment is the only monetary policy a society really needs.
Okay, so if the core rule is don't steal, that brings up a pretty big question about our current system, doesn't it? And this leads us to what Armstrong calls the sin of fiat money.
Now, check this out, because this perspective makes a really critical distinction between two kinds of fiat. That's just a fancy word for creating something by decree. First, you've got divine fiat. That's when God speaks value into existence. Let there be light. This is seen as creating something real, something tangible. But then you have carnal fiat. That's when humans try to do the same thing, decreeing let there be money out of thin air. The argument here is that this act is a direct violation of natural law. And that violation ties right back to a fundamental principle we all kind of know: sowing and reaping. You have to put in the work. You have to sow to get a reward, to reap. But when a central authority can just print money, it lets a select few reap a harvest they never actually sowed. They get the reward without doing any of the work.
And this is where it gets really personal. This line of thinking leads to a pretty powerful conclusion about the human cost. The quote says it all. If you debase the money, you debase the man. The idea here is that money is just a stand-in for our most valuable, most finite assets, our time and our energy. So when that currency gets devalued through inflation, it's seen as a direct theft of the time and energy people have already spent.
So you're probably wondering, who is the person connecting these dots between the Bible and Bitcoin? Let's take a look at the pastor who had this revelation. Alin Armstrong's story is not what you might expect. He actually started out as a professional wrestler chasing a childhood dream. But after a while, he felt unfulfilled, and that search for deeper meaning led him to Christianity and eventually to becoming a pastor. Then, fast forward to 2020, with all the money printing going on, he just obsessively dove into Bitcoin, trying to figure out why this thing had so much value.
And his big aha moment, his light bulb moment, came while he was reading history. He read about the Roman Emperor Nero debasing coins to pay for his regime, and it just clicked. He made the connection. Tyrants debase money. That's the problem Bitcoin solves. For him, that was the key that unlocked everything.
So, if fiat money is the moral problem, then how exactly is Bitcoin the solution? Well, it's presented as something Armstrong calls the truth machine.
From this perspective, the greatest innovation of Bitcoin isn't its speed, it's not the technology itself, it's the morality. The argument is that it fundamentally takes the power to create and manipulate money out of the hands of flawed, tempted human beings, or as Armstrong puts it, sinful men.
So how does it do that? Well, this argument breaks it down into 4 key features that make Bitcoin a more moral money. First, it removes human control. Second, it's built on the objective, verifiable truth of math. Third, it's tied to that real-world principle of sowing and reaping because of the energy required for proof of work. And finally, and this is a big one, it has a fixed, unchangeable supply of 21 million. No one can ever just decide to make more. And that's why it gets the name the truth machine. It's a system run by a protocol that you can't argue with. You can't lobby it. You can't change it on a whim. The rules just are, and they're the same for everyone, equally.
Okay, so this focus on objective truth and money, it actually leads the argument to a much, much bigger question for society. From this viewpoint, a society's relationship with truth in one area reflects its relationship with truth everywhere else. And that presents a pretty stark choice, framed here as Christ or chaos.
And here's something really interesting that Armstrong has noticed. For some people, the journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole doesn't just stop with understanding money. When you come face to face with an unchangeable, objective truth in one part of your life, it can spark a search for it in other areas, sometimes leading people all the way to religious faith.
The theological argument for this is laid out in the book of Romans. The idea is that when people suppress a truth that they intuitively know is real, they're given over to what's called a debased mind. And this detachment from reality, well, it leads to absurdity and decay in society, manifesting in things like claiming 2 + 2 = 5, or that math itself is racist.
And this brings us to what is framed as the ultimate choice for society. The path of rejecting objective reality, the argument goes, will inevitably lead to chaos. The only alternative from this point of view is a return to a foundation of absolute truth, which is represented by Christ.
So we're left with this final, really profound question to think about. If a monetary system based on human whims can, as this argument suggests, lead to a debased society, then what kind of world could we build if our money was based not on fallible authority, but on objective mathematical truth?